Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Podcast. This is the back of the bus session.
Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. It's really hot today, so if you can hear a little noise in the background, I've just been and bought 2 new fans, and I've got 2 new fans in front of me. Right, I didn't plan that; it just came to be. Thank you, universe.
Genius.
Welcome to the Old Farm Bus, Jess and Nick.
Yay! Thank you for having us.
How are we doing, guys?
Really good. A bit hot, but loving being here.
It's warm, isn't it?
It's very warm.
It's beautiful. Have you been waiting for this?
Absolutely.
Now, can I get you to introduce your own businesses? Because sometimes I fluff it up for people's businesses, and I know it's important. Let's get this right. Jess, what's your business?
So, I am a empowerment coach for highly sensitive women, and we'll probably go through what that means a bit later on. But I mostly help women break free from burnout, from perfectionism, from overworking, and help them thrive in their sensitive superpowers, I call it.
Sensitive superpowers.
Yes. So yeah, I work with people one-to-one. I've got group empowerment programs, and yeah, I've been doing it now since, what will it be, April 21. So yeah, it's been the most incredible nearly year and a half, and yeah, that's me in a little nutshell.
I'm excited about this because the superpower thing, you know, I go into lots of schools, we have kids work here, and there's just so many labels that they put on themselves, and I did as a kid, dyslexic, ADHD, and I'm like, okay, cool, what does that mean?
Yes.
And they're like, I can't. I'm like, okay, hang on, what can you do though? What do you do differently? And then we're like, okay, how is this a superpower? So I'm really excited to hear how you've reinvented that. That's
amazing.
Awesome. And Nick,
Hey, Mikey.
what's
how you
your
doing, mate?
It's nice to see you, Nick.
I know, mate.
I
I know.
wanted to spend a bit more time with you after we met. So,
you
yeah,
too,
tell us
mate.
your business, and then we're going to really get inside each other's minds.
So I am a highly sensitive man. And my business is Nick Edgar Coaching, NLP and hypnotherapy. So I predominantly work with men who really want to transform themselves in their lives. They've come to a point where they feel stuck. They know there's something inside them, potential-wise, that they haven't reached yet, and they might have hidden it for years. They might even be ashamed of it or worried about what it could be. And I helped them to explore that, to become comfortable with it compassionately, and then start to experiment with it and start to grow and potentially become the man that they know they can be deep down.
Oh, I'm
Reveal
excited about this episode, genuinely.
Me
So,
too.
highly sensitive people.
Yeah.
Is it good then to differentiate the men and women in highly sensitive, and do they act differently?
So, do you want me to go next?
Yeah, I'll go with.
So, highly sensitive is essentially a personality trait. So it's not something we're going to go and get clinically diagnosed in the doctors. It's a personality trait that 1 in 5 of us have, men and women. And it's an innate trait. So it was coined by Dr. Elaine Aron in the 90s. So it's still fairly in its infancy, especially with the research. But it's essentially a depth of processing sensitivity. So how we process our environment, the stimuli that we're around. So we're more sensitive to like lights, smells, sounds. We feel things incredibly deeply. But we see this trait in animals. So when we think of like the animals that can sense threat for the rest of the pack, let's say, that's what we have. So we can pick up vibes, energy. We can walk into a room and sense things a lot deeper.
Right.
And yeah, it's something that I think not everyone will be aware of, because I don't think the term necessarily highly sensitive lands for people straight away. But we are just, for me personally, my trait shows up in, let's say I'm watching like the news or I'm hearing someone's story about what they've been through, or I'm watching Red Nose Day Comic Relief. I will feel such overwhelming emotion. I will probably cry a lot. So I'm very sensitive in that way, in terms of like how I feel. I feel the world's pain at the moment, for example. During lockdown, I found that particularly challenging. And yeah, I think, like for me personally, light. I'm very sensitive to light. So at the moment, my energy's quite low, and my eyes are really, like, I feel a lot of pain in my eyes, so I have to be like very mindful of the light in the house. I don't have main lights on, for example. It's like low light or candles, and I'll let Nick kind of explain how his high sensitivity guest shows up for you.
Yeah.
So for me as a male, it's a slightly different experience. There's many commonalities. I think for me the biggest thing, and especially when I look back at my whole life, it's the strength of emotions that I feel. And as a man, and a younger man, and even as a kid, what that would mean for me as a male. So when I feel anger, I probably feel anger a lot more viscerally than someone that isn't highly sensitive. So that kind of male-female traits, if you like, I will feel exactly as Jess expressed, but the more common male traits more sensitively. Jess is visual, but I'm more audio. So for example, if I am in a restaurant and me and Jess are having a conversation, if someone drops a plates on the floor and everyone starts cheering, that is all I can hear, and then it will ring in my ears afterwards for a while we continue to try and have a conversation. So there's also things I have to manage with it, as well as it being that empathetic, being able to tune, being able to meet people where they are and feel that. That's more of the superpower.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Now, Jess, I'm going to go with you here then. At what age did you realise this was who you are?
Yeah.
And how were you confronted with people when you were trying to articulate this to them?
Well, I'll say that I lived 36 years of my life not knowing I was highly sensitive.
Seriously?
Yeah. So would it help to give you a bit of background?
Yeah, I mean, we're on a podcast, and this podcast goes as long as we want.
Yeah,
so
amazing.
You can really get into the nitty-gritty, meaty side of it. Yeah. And the same with Nick. We'll just go to the cause.
Great stuff. So where do I start?
Take us back. The
beginning.
So in childhood, I had a lovely childhood, but looking back in retrospect, my dad suffered a lot with his mental and emotional health. He was in and out of psychiatric care, struggled with addiction. My mum then picked up work, so she was very much like having to overwork. She was burning out all the time. Both of them would put their hands up and say they numbed out a lot because of the stress of what they were navigating with drink. So it was very kind of, especially for my mum, it was very kind of work hard and then you just relax. You just do whatever you need to do just to chill out. So I didn't obviously know as an infant I was highly sensitive, but I can tell that because my parents weren't necessarily able to hold me in my big emotions and my sensitivity, I learnt quite early on to wear masks to kind of protect myself. So I learnt to caretake for everyone else's emotional needs. So I looked after my dad, but also looked after the whole family's like emotions. I looked after my little sister, who is definitely highly sensitive, but would show her emotions a lot more than me. So I learnt to put my emotions to one side, because I subconsciously thought that wasn't helping my parents. So I became quite tough and the strong one and the independent one, and developed like codependency, which happens a lot, I think, to children of parents with addiction or people that had to look after people physically and with their health. And yeah, through my whole life, I would attract people that needed that emotional support. So I'd caretake in every aspect, whether it was work, in romantic relationships, friendships. I developed perfectionism and overworking. I was a very high achiever. So even in like my late teens, when as a family we experienced some incredibly traumatic things, and we lost a couple of family members, I still went to the best university. I went and studied psychology because I wanted to understand what was going on for my family. I'm a very cognitive person, so I know all the theory. I like to understand what's going on, and I always had a pull to help other people at that point. Like I thought I might go into counselling or become a therapist, but when I left university, my dad was incredibly ill again, so I just kind of put that all to one side and looked after him. And the work route I went down was the corporate world. I went into recruitment. So I mainly worked in education recruitment because I loved working with teachers and head teachers and TAs and stuff. But with that came a lot of pressure. There was a lot of like having to show results and make sales, and I thrived in it. I did very well, but it, in hindsight, wasn't very good for my sensitivity. There was a lot of loud personalities, a lot of sound, a lot of bright lights. Why the offices were just so poorly lit, but it probably fed into my pain body and the trauma that I'd been through, just to keep busy, don't face anything. And I too went very work hard, play hard. So it would be like work hard, do really well, go down the pub, repeat. So I learnt to hide my emotions and push everything down with alcohol. So, there was certain periods of my life where, I could easily sink a bottle of red a night just to be able to go to sleep.
Wow.
And on the face of it, everyone's like, "Oh, you're sunshine." They used to always call me sunshine, like, "You're so smiley," and that was my front, and I did this until I couldn't do it anymore. So in 2017, I was out working in New York, actually. I'd been sent out to New York to recruit a leadership team for this events company. On Instagram, it looked like I was living my best life, living in Brooklyn, working in Manhattan. I was having my dark night of the soul. I was so depressed. I was having the darkest of thoughts. New York is amazing when you're in a good place. It's really challenging if you're not, because what you have access to, if you have a certain kind of way about you, is not going to serve you. So it was like the city that never sleeps. Everyone's out drinking and doing whatever, and actually I had to come back to the UK. Everything fell apart, relationship fell apart. I was living on my mum's couch with like the biggest suitcase you've ever seen with my whole life in it, and I was like 35, just going, well, what do I do now? But that's where my whole life changed for the better. Like, the only way was up for me, and I got very deep into the work, into understanding my codependency, how this was playing out in relationships, how I was just constantly burning out every 6 months at work, why I was drinking the way I was drinking, moved up to Nottingham. Met Nick probably a year after that, it was around then that I found out about highly sensitive. It was through watching a documentary called Sensitive: The Untold Story, and it was by Dr. Elaine Aron, who coined the term, and it featured Alanis Morissette, my absolute hero, who is a highly sensitive person. And now when I listen to her lyrics, I'm like, oh my god, I really can see that now.
Do I need to go back and revisit a bit more on
Jagged Little Pill, get it on,
okay.
But it every lyric spoke to me. And I think that's another thing as well, like music for highly sensitive people is so huge. If you feel every single lyric and it speaks to your soul, you might be highly sensitive. But I watched that documentary and just burst into tears, as per. But it was like, oh my god, someone sees me. Like, I'm not alone. I'm not broken. Like, it showed me that I have a superpower and I could start to be a bit more vulnerable. Because someone said to me the other day, actually, funnily enough, who was looking to work with me, and she went, but I don't think I'm highly sensitive. And I said, oh, okay, tell me why. And she said, because I hold all my emotions in. And I was like, let's chat.
Here we go. Let's peel these layers.
Because that was me. And I think when people hear the term highly sensitive, it's easy to be like, oh, wallflower.
Yeah.
Highly sensitive. Actually, no, I wasn't. I was very strong. I have very strong protector parts that are tough girl and ice queen. And that is because I wasn't allowed to be highly sensitive in childhood. I wasn't allowed to be authentically me. And that wasn't just because of my parents, that was probably because of society and maybe my teachers. And do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just learnt to push that down, but it really did change my life. It just, it's why I'm known as a highly sensitive coach, because we do have the most incredible superpowers. I genuinely believe that like highly sensitive people can change the world. We could be the best leaders. Like, the world needs this trait.
And I want to go more into that story. We'll get on to you, Nick. But when you say you had sort of an epiphany or a pivotal moment, what happened there? Was it literally that documentary that sent you into this world? Or when you went back to your mum's, you had that big suitcase, did something happen there where you went, I've got to genuinely change the trajectory of my life soon?
I think I've always known it. I think it's just been like these little ambers that have just been enabled to be a fire later on in my life. So I think like when I was in and out of psychiatric care for my dad's, you know, there was something in him. It was like, this doesn't seem right. I want to help these people. Like, what is going on for them, really? Like, it was heartbreaking to watch. And then I think going to uni and studying psychology, there was this real desire of like, I want to really help people. But what I was never able to do at that time was to show that same empathy to myself. And, you know, I would cry for the world, but I'd never cry for me. I'd learnt to cognitively wire my brain to think positively as a survival mechanism. So like, I'd always be like, well, other people have it worse, Jess, you know? Keep going, like, it, you know, be stoic, everyone has it worse. And that's been what I've had to unravel. So I think I've always wanted to change the world, but I just didn't have the self-belief, I didn't have the confidence. Like, my worthiness was on the floor.
And tools to do so.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned codependency. How did that manifest? What were you experiencing?
So with codependency, it is suggested that it can manifest if you have looked after people with addiction. And what it does is you slowly start to subconsciously attach your worth to serving other people.
Right.
So you then might fall into, let's say, romantic relationships where that partner might be an addict, or they might have mental or emotional health problems. But the part that really shook me when I realised about codependency was the word manipulative.
Oh, yeah.
Where actually it can turn quite toxic, and you wanting to save and fix everyone is actually really not helpful for you or that other person. And it's subconsciously manipulative. Like, you're finding environments where you can save and fix. It's a long term behaviour to break. I
did some work recently, character development work, and one of the big ones of mine was a people pleaser. And this guy, Paul Cope, has been on this podcast, incredible guy. But I was like, well, that's good, isn't it? People pleaser. I'm just trying to help people. He goes, okay, but you don't like manipulators. You wrote that down. What's a people pleaser doing? You want people to like you. You're manipulating their thoughts. You're manipulating their perception of you. That's a manipulation in its essence. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not being an authentic human. I'm just doing acts to make them feel and think a certain way about me. That was a cut right deep, but it's really helped me in life be conscious of the decisions I'm making, the actions I'm doing. Am I doing this for them? Am I doing it for me? How authentic is this movement? So that's a really interesting conversation, and could fix a lot of people. Just tuning in a little bit more and bringing that unconscious conscious.
Exactly. And it's,
I think you said that before, Nick. I think I've learned that from you, mate.
I think you might have stolen that one, but you can have it.
No, it's yours, man. I love that. I've learned a lot from this man here.
so have I. So have I, still every day. But people pleasing is a massive part of what we both do for people. And like you say, it's really confronting when you first face our behaviours and our actions and how that's linked to our subconscious beliefs and mind. And it can feel brutal at times, can't it, the work, when you start unravelling everything and be like, oh my word.
The interesting thing is, though, then you can create a polarity where then you don't do anything for anyone
Yeah.
because you're like, I've been told this, so now I've got to act like this.
Yeah.
But it's finding that beautiful nuance within it, isn't it? And that
100%.
balancing factor.
Absolutely.
Where you can go, oh, okay, I'm in this situation. I feel maybe I'm people pleasing, but the fact that I'm conscious of it, I'm fine with that. I've got enough understanding around this situation that I'm willing to give that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it does.
I think that's important.
It really, really does. Absolutely. And I think for both me and Nick, it was really important that we recognised where people pleasing was showing up, because especially for codependency, it would be incredibly dangerous for me to be a coach wanting to help people and then subconsciously attaching my self-worth to their outcome,
Okay.
because it's up to our clients to do the work.
Yeah.
But if I'm not aware of my subconscious behaviours and beliefs, it can be incredibly dangerous. So obviously we are both always heavily invested in our own growth and in our own healing, because I owe that to myself first, but to everyone that I serve, you know.
Well, Jess, you've just got the tick. You're an awesome human. I really like you a lot.
Oh,
So that's sealed.
Pressure's on
Let's
now.
turn to our man, Nick.
Yes, mate.
Highly sensitive. Have you always been this way, this trait? You've carried it out through childhood. And when did you discover it? Let's go for your breakdown, mate.
So the discovering it, similar to Jess, was fairly recently. I didn't know it was a thing, really. When I reflect on my life all the way back to my earliest memories, I now view them through that lens, and they make far more sense to me. So I'll give you a couple of examples from being a really younger child. My parents, I would sense when something was off with them, and I'd say, what's wrong? And when kids say that to parents' response generally is like, nothing, it's fine, everything's fine, mum and dad are just talking or whatever. And it's like, and I have a memory right now as I'm talking to you of me feeling, no, everything's not all right. So that was to really play a big part of the first sort of 40 years, where my intuition that was naturally there, my high sensitivity that was naturally there as a really young person, I learnt to mistrust it in all sorts of environments. There's three main things for me growing up that were a big part of my life. There was Catholic Church, do this, be this, or you're sinning and you're going to go to hell. That's quite a lot
Yeah, that's
to have
pressure.
in one way or another. My parents were teachers, and my dad, well, for both of them, put me in the same school as my dad was teaching. I don't know why teachers do that, but it's quite common.
Really?
So if there's any teachers out there just that have kids in the school, I'd just be wary. And the reason why that had a big impact on me, because I saw my dad in a professional environment, joking, laughing, a great teacher. Everybody looked up to him, respected him. He ran the football team. He was great. But at home, he was so miserable and he was so angry. And that duality of experience of, oh, so this is what you're really like, but I'm seeing you like this. Why can't I see you like this at home? And that stuck with me throughout the third thing that came into my life as a younger person. That was football.
Right.
So very quickly I got noticed as being a good footballer, and my high sensitivity played a part in that. I was a really good striker because I could anticipate what was going to happen before anyone else, because I could feel it. I could feel, if I make this run here and that ball comes where I hope it's going to come, bang, I'm going to get a shot. And it's all subconscious, but that was a real big part. By the time Spurs picked me up at 10 years old, I remember one of the first games that I went to, and I'm sitting in the change room and I'm nervous, just like probably every other kid was there, and I can hear the two coaches. There's kids yapping away that are much louder, but I can hear the two coaches going, we don't have a left back. And I said, when they came round, where'd you play? Came to me, where'd you play? I said, left back. I never played there in my life. But I did it because I wanted to please. And I wanted to stay at Spurs. And I wanted to be a footballer so badly that all the environments that I were in, home environment, school environment, football, were all trying to mould me into what they thought a successful, potentially successful person would be. But naturally, I sat so far outside of that very quickly I developed those people-pleasing tendencies. So as I went through puberty and adolescence, I said to my dad after I'd been at Spurs for about a year, I said, I don't want to go here anymore. You know, there's 50 kids here. The coaches don't even know my name really. Like, I'm just not enjoying it. I didn't feel connected. I didn't feel part of it. I tried being at Luton. That didn't work. The ages of 14 to 18 within football, off the back of everything else, like I genuinely had faith as a young kid as a Catholic, but I began to question, this doesn't feel right. At home with my dad, that didn't feel right. Football saying, you must have a haircut like this and I'm going to coach you to play this way. Whereas naturally I might have wanted to do something different. Okay, I'm going to do that to please you. Yeah. All of these things all coming together in such a way that who I was naturally didn't seem to actually be able to express himself. So I pushed all of that emotion down, all of that upset down, all of it down, so that by the time I spent 3 years at Watford and came to 16, when they released me, it was just absolutely heartbreaking. I did get picked up by Reading, went to play for Reading, left school, did an apprenticeship with them. 6 weeks into pre-season, my knee went. So that's another knock. The football culture was something that was a shock to me. Things like initiations, which you get in all sports teams, that kind of thing was a real shock to me. But again, pushed all that emotion down. Like, I can't show it. If I show it, they'll take the mick out of me. And they did when I showed it, which just proved, well, I can't show my emotions then. I've got to push them down. I've got to try and express them secretly. And there's an incident that happened to me when I was at Reading. I'd got over the injury in 8 months, started my second season there, and there was a pre-season friendly going on. And I hope I'm all right to say this. So a couple of the lads that were the kind of real bullies within that youth team, they were urinating into the teapot.
Wowzers.
And I thought, I need their approval. I need their approval. And I did the same. But as I was doing it, the first team coach walked in the door and saw me do it. And I got sacked from my contract. And I remember being in Mark McGee's office, sat there the following morning, thinking, oh, well, the other lads are going to stand up for me. They're going to say, oh, we did it as well. I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to get out of this team spirit. This is what all this banter, what it's all for. No one said a word. And I was just, I felt like the whole world was just against me.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't explain how I was feeling because I'd never expressed my feelings. It just kept pushing it down. Then, ultimately, I sacked football off. I played some non-league at Stevenage for a year or two while I was doing my sixth form, but that was when I started drinking, and that was when I started smoking weed, and that was when I started replacing the feeling of walking around pretty much every day, not experiencing my emotions, with that numbing out high. And that was beautiful. It was like a release. It really was. And I probably, cutting an already longer story shorter, probably spent the vast majority of the next 20 years numbing out.
Yeah. Didn't like reality at all.
No, I couldn't deal with it because I didn't know how to express myself. It was only when I was at one of my lowest ebbs that I decided to go to my GP, got referred to therapy, and that was probably the first environment I felt I could express myself authentically and safely, and that took quite a long time. And then out of that came self-expression through writing, and then came lyrics, and then came singing, which was something going right back to primary school that I loved to do, but I didn't do it because all the other boys took the mickey out of me for singing.
Wow. So
for me, most of my 30s, certainly the second half of my 30s and now my 40s, have really been spent trying to heal and develop the self-confidence to be myself, to express myself authentically, to not people please if people disagree with me. And I've had a lot of support and help with that, a lot of therapy, I've worked with coaches, I've done a hell of a lot of reading, and I've been willing to take on ideas that are meaningful to me over time that maybe the rest of the world wouldn't necessarily take on quite so easily.
Okay, so with being a highly sensitive man, did you feel weakness when you had to accept that at the start?
Well, I think initially, the question I constantly asked was, what is wrong with me?
Yeah.
Why do I not want to be like these other lads? Why can I not fit into this team and this sport? Because I'm good at it and I want to be part of it. But there was just the equal power within me was saying, equally powerfully was saying, but I want to do it as me. But I can't do it as me. I'm so scared. And I think the sensitivity part of that was I was just feeling those emotions so much stronger than maybe someone that isn't highly sensitive. I just couldn't cope and I didn't know what was happening.
Okay. So is the brain neurodiverse? Is it wired differently? Is it the nurture and nature conversation that comes up a lot?
Yeah.
Do you know much about that and what is this?
So it's innate, we're born with it and we can't get rid of it. We are wired a little bit differently. There is still a lot of research happening about neurodiversity. A lot of people go, oh, is it similar to autism? And it's not. There are some similarities when you hear about it, but actually, no, it's very separate. It's a personality trait. But one thing I didn't mention earlier is, we have incredibly sensitive nervous systems. And I think this is where I find it fascinating when you're thinking about things like anxiety, depression, mental and emotional struggles. It really makes me think, is that because my nervous system just is more sensitive than the rest of the world?
Yeah. And it's a genetic programming then. Do they know what part of it to break down the brain? Is it like the frontal lobe? Does that develop differently or any?
I wouldn't feel confident to talk about that side of it.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not that scientific. However, the ways that I've probably invested a lot in it is understanding the emotional side and how it affects our there's a gentleman called Paul Gilbert who talks about emotional regulation systems, and we both do a lot of work around this and how we can understand what systems are we sitting in most of the time. So a lot of us as highly sensitive people will sit in our threat system. It's that fight, flight, freeze, fawn being the people pleasing.
Yeah.
So it is like a threat response, people pleasing.
Okay.
And a lot of people say it can be related to trauma as well. It's absolutely fascinating. But we've also got systems. We've got our affiliative system, which is our soothing system, our self-care system, that calming inner voice. And then you've got the drive system, which is really important for motivation and taking action and forward motion. I sit a lot in my drive, don't I, Nick?
Yeah, we're opposite. So, for example, as highly sensitive, is spending time in that threat, whereas Jess will go into drive. She spoke about high achievement, and that's her way of coping, taking action. I will always seek my affiliative system and safety and non-action.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's just a slight. We're both highly sensitive, but we choose different paths naturally.
Yeah.
And that's how we've coped with the trauma in our life. Going back to the point that you made about, is it genetic? Is it? I think it can partly be but I think a lot of this. Let me phrase it another way. All of us, whoever we are, have a certain set of circumstances, genes, before we've even entered this earth. During pregnancy, for example.
Yeah.
So I'm one of 4 siblings. I'm the second in line between my elder sister and my 2 younger brothers. My mum unfortunately had a stillborn child, so her pregnancy with me was really anxiety ridden, quite naturally.
Yeah.
So she firmly believes, and we've spoken about this a number of times, I know she won't mind me saying it here, but she believes that anxiety helped, as I was forming in her womb, that sensitivity, that kind of prone to maybe anxiousness and that need for safety.
Right, okay.
Now, I don't know whether scientifically that's true, but there are certain thinkers such as Gabor Mate, Dick Schwartz is another one that talks about internal family system and parts we develop, these masks, and those two particularly resonate with both of us, don't they? And we recognise ourselves and our stories within those models.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And, especially in our society, we live in a harsh world, really. there's a lot of pressure added, and it's achieving, moving forward.
Yeah.
And to exist in that, it really must perpetuate it as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Gives a lot of weight to you.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with people and you're going through to find out if they are highly sensitive first, that seems like a conversation you're having. What kind of traits and characteristics are you listening out for there then? Because we spoke about people pleasing and a few others. What are some top 5, top 10 that you're going, okay, that sounds right?
So a lot of the people that gravitate towards me are going to be very similar to me and what I talk about. So a lot of them push their emotions down. So I explore that a little bit further. I really try and understand, like, why would that be? Like, what's your thoughts around, like, how does it make you feel if I was to describe you being emotional or showing those emotions to other people? I think when people are incredibly descriptive about their experiences to me, that's a really good indication. They might talk about the other stuff, like their sensitivity to their stimuli. They might talk about overwhelm a lot. One of the signs of high sensitivity is like overstimulation. It's not necessarily a word that a lot of people use. They might use overwhelm because that's used so much, isn't it, in the world? So I just start exploring all of those different types of traits, and then I probably would direct them to Elaine Aron's website where you can actually do a test.
Okay.
So you can actually fill that in yourself.
I'll put that in the links, actually. That'd be cool. What's it called?
If you go to www.hsperson.com.
Brilliant.
And you can find out if your child is highly sensitive as well on there. So if you've got children, you think, actually,
That's
things like, I did a workshop the other day about sporting highly sensitive children, but children that are called fussy. Like, really explore that. See if they might be highly sensitive. A lot of highly sensitive children will not like certain textures on their skin. They'll be really sensitive to that. They might not like certain foods. They might, like one of my friend's children, I was saying the other day, goes into the toilet, and if someone puts their hand dryer on, it's like hands over ears. Like, all these signs are really beautiful signs that they might be highly sensitive. So yeah, definitely check out Elaine Aron's website. That's
brilliant. And with you, Nick, then, how do you go routing when you're working with somebody or coaching, listening out for those things?
I think for me, and it's really, first of all, holding space and allowing the men I work with, or potentially are going to work with, to start to talk and to start to share their experience with me, and just to let them do that for as long as they need to, because very often they've just not had too many opportunities to do that. One of the key things for me in terms of success as far as men go, generally speaking, not always, but they feel like they've got more potential than they're showing out in the world. They feel they can be a better man in their relationships. They feel they can be a better dad than they are. There's just this intuition that they don't share with the people closest to them, through fear of potentially feeling a failure or in their eyes. That's the thing that worries men a lot, I think. It's that ability to keep all the plates going and not wanting to ask for help and ask for support. That's just a dead giveaway. The words they use when they describe their experience, are they using words which describe emotions, or are they using words which describe thinking? And for me, generally, if they're using words that describe emotions, they're more likely to be highly sensitive than if they're in their head a lot. It's not always the case. You can't generalise, too much, but those are the key signs for me, I think.
How's it been coaching and going into that world? Are you really enjoying it?
Yeah, I love it. I do, because I spent, I touched on it earlier, a lot of my personal time numbing out and then doing jobs that I wasn't passionate about, so most of the jobs I did were kind of sales, customer service, first line manager type stuff within a corporate environment that I really struggled to fit in and be myself in. But I enjoyed the kind of working with people and their development plans. I enjoyed that kind of stuff. I went back to football eventually as a coach, and got a lot out of working with players outside of the actual football work, listening to them about their stories, that kind of stuff. Now that I've turned that into my business and thinking about my own life story, being able to facilitate the opportunity for a man to really invest in himself, to go deep, to understand what's happening for him as he describes it, to ask him questions about that, to ask him to inquire about his beliefs, about himself and the world around him, but to do that with compassion,
Sure.
not to judge. Because I think bringing compassion to that allows you to really face that kind of truth of yourself. And from there, that's the seed that you can then plant and start to experiment with it. Bring that into how you are with your loved ones, how you are with your kids, in the smallest of ways to begin with sometimes. Some people are ready for big jumps, some people aren't. And it's really just suggesting and reflecting back to them some of the things they're saying. Because every time a man that I work with speaks to me, they're giving me different jigsaw pieces.
Sure.
When I present those jigsaw pieces in a box and say, have you considered if you put these together, what would that look like? And suddenly they can start to see a picture, and that picture could be their
That's a
best self,
beautiful
their ambition.
Metaphor. That's really nice. Have you found a lot of resistance? Because as I'm having this conversation with you two, I'm a man, and I particularly work with a lot of masculinity in my life. From youngsters to when I go to schools, I'm working with lots of teachers. It is a quite masculine world for me, and I can imagine a lot of resistance in when you're going and opening up and showing emotions and sharing emotions and talking. Do they want to initially switch off?
So this is, for me, is where the NLP and the hypnotherapy comes in. Because
skillful man, well played. I like this guy too.
Talking is good. It is good. Look, me and you both go to circles, and we know the power of that because we feel able to express ourselves in that environment. That works for us. That's not going to work for every man. Not every man's going to have the literacy skill to be able to put into words how they're feeling. So, what a combination of NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, and hypnotherapy can do, which is very similar in lots of ways, is tap into that person's subconscious, and you can talk to them directly. So the cognitive part of the brain, the protector parts, where that resistance might come in, you kind of bypass that. And you get to what's really going on, and you get to talk to that part of that person.
They are.
And potentially start to rewire it.
Wow.
Now that takes something for them. They have to join you halfway. They have to be willing to want those techniques and to explore that. And I do get some resistance there sometimes. We've both had clients recently where we kind of feel it could be beneficial, so we suggest it and they say, no, it's not for me. Okay, not a problem. And I think that's the bit, alluding to the point Jess made earlier about the people pleasing, we have to accept that as coaches, and that's our challenge.
That's interesting, because when they come to you, sure, they're in a state of readiness for change because they're talking to you, and there's something there, and there's a need to be met, but then still a resistance there.
Yes, but I think it's a process, and for everybody it's differently. So my own kind of healing journey and realisation that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life numbing out, or I could be in serious trouble. When I had suicidal ideation, probably 10, 12 years ago, at my lowest point, I made that decision that I wanted to change. That was a real turning point. This has worked for me for a while. Now it's not working for me. Now it's really not working for me. I need to make changes. Now someone might have that same realisation because they've lost a relationship, or they're estranged from their kids, or whatever that might be, or they've lost a job even. It's different for everybody. And the first time you ask for help, the intention is real and the intention's there, but you just might not be ready for it, and that's okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Do you do NLP as well, Jess?
Yes,
you
absolutely.
Do. And neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Run us through it.
Yeah, I find it absolutely fascinating, and similar to like what Nick said, I think because I am so in my head, like I've always been all in my head, understanding theory, cognitively working everything out, never understanding what's going on in my body, like completely disconnected. I found working with holistic, like the whole body approach, holistic coaches so powerful. Like I went to talking therapy at certain times, I had CBT. It's great. It works for some people. Didn't work for me. I could sit in that chair and tell them exactly what they needed to hear and play it, and then go to Co-op and get a bottle of wine on the way home and just go back to how it was. Like,
you're a people pleaser.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
want them
I know
to feel
exactly.
good. You're doing a great job.
You're doing amazing work.
It's true.
But when I had, when I understood about neurolinguistic programming and I hired coaches that were trained in it, they were able to really tap into that subconscious belief system. So I had a great deal of shame that held beliefs such as, you're just a fucking failure. Sorry, can I swear?
Yeah.
Thank you. Good. Should have checked
Doing
that earlier.
more, guys. What's up?
Like,
Yeah.
literally, like, I'm such a potty mouth. I'm like, oh no, I should have checked that.
I've been gutted. There's not been enough.
I know, like, come
here.
on.
Yeah.
But you know, I am an absolute failure. I am not worthy. You don't really think I am not worthy, but it's very similar beliefs about my worthiness. And that was that my coaches were able to tap into that, and I was able to start showing myself more love and compassion and empathy, and start to reduce that shame swamp that I was just drowning in. And we don't often cognitively know, oh, I'm feeling deeply unworthy. However, we might be a perfectionist or a people pleaser, or we might overwork and we burn out every 6 months. That to me is a beautiful indication that that person has quite a lot of shame in that subconscious mind. So I'm able to tap into that and help them to release a lot of this behaviour. I'm also trained like Nick in hypnotherapy. I'm trained in timeline therapy, which is a beautiful holistic technique to release trapped core negative emotion from the past. So anger,
Sounds very important.
so important. So it helps release anger, sadness, fear, hurt and guilt from your unconscious. It's like we get to our adult life and we're often carrying like a backpack of rocks, and we're carrying all this stuff from our past. So it helps release it from the past, but it doesn't stop us from, you know, experiencing these emotions in the present and going forward, because they're very important. Like for me, anger is my core emotion. That is what shows up for me a lot. And I'm going through my own journey with anger. You know, I think as women, it's a big journey with anger and rage.
Yeah.
Because we were never allowed to exhibit that. It's like, don't do that. That's not ladylike.
So repress,
So repress. And I've held in so much emotion, so much rage, that has ultimately, I believe, led to gut health problems. I've had emotional eating all my life. And I believe that's because I ate to push down my emotions, so I didn't feel them. And these beautiful emotional freedom techniques, like I was saying to you before the podcast about tapping, they're all beautiful ways to allow this energy, allow this emotion to leave and to flow.
Express itself.
Yeah, you know, emotion is energy in motion. It is supposed to be moving.
I like that.
Yeah, it's supposed to be moving around our bodies, and when we trap it, it really does cause dis-ease. It can cause so many different problems, manifest in so many different ways. So I help all these wonderful people to just release and to like let go of these rocks, let go of this backpack that they're carrying around with them.
Do you have to go into sort of generational trauma with them then? Do they talk about their experiences and stuff?
So I'm very explicit that I'm not a therapist. So if someone wants to unpack their trauma, that's where therapy will come in. So I signpost them to therapy. I help them. I believe that, you know, trauma isn't the experience. It's not what happened. It's what happened to your body. So I help with the belief system that they formed after that trauma. So I am useless. I am unlovable. I help with that. I help release those beliefs.
That feels quite actionable. There's something you can do with that.
Exactly.
I feel a commonality I get on this podcast, and something I've experienced myself, is I've gone to therapy and we've had this long discussion. We've gone back all into the pains and the experiences I've been through and hold attachment to, these energies to, and then I'm just left with them. And I'm like, ouch, what do I do now? And I kind of know why I seek validation and desperate for people to like me. I understand that now. I've looked at my mum's side, looked at my dad's side, looked at everyone around at that time, but then I'm just sat in it. And there's still a bit of resentment for them. I know you need to let go, but I think, I wished I hadn't had this life. And yours here is saying, okay, well, them emotions that you're feeling right now, we can work with.
Yes,
we can do something about that.
We can start to become more emotionally literate.
Yes.
I think so many of us, we've not been taught how to manage our emotions, how to build resilience. And when I say resilience, that isn't like to be stoic and strong, because that's what I'm trying to unravel. It's actually to be able to sit with my big emotions, not wanting to numb out, and just allow them to be. No judgment. You're feeling really angry. Okay, what are we going to do with this? I'm going to punch a pillow. I'm going to scream. Like, I'm going to rage on a page, as Gabby Bernstein calls it. Like,
rage on a page.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, it's one of the
so many
best.
good snippets from this podcast today.
But it's so true. It's how do we like fall in love with our emotions? How do we really accept them and allow them to be into flow without really trying to push them down? They're meant to come out. They're meant to flow. And I think, like Nick was talking about, like how he never felt like he was able to be himself. Like, I think why I didn't go down other routes and I went down holistic coaching is because I am not the expert here. Yes, I'm skilled in techniques and I'm skilled at coaching, but you sat in front of me, the expert. This isn't this power dynamic that you see in some kind of clinical and therapeutic models. This is, you are the expert of your life and you have all the tools. We just need to access them. And then you can go away with actionable things that you can do. So if that person's a people pleaser, I'm going to walk alongside you as you start to put boundaries in place, as you start to let go of some connections that don't serve you, you know. And it's like, I can walk alongside you and I can be your cheerleader, and I can also be quite confronting at times, and I will question and I will reflect back. But I'm there to help you take that action forward and to give you that toolbox, basically.
This is fantastic. I'm really enjoying this.
Oh, ditto.
I think I started down the route of therapy training as a therapist, because I personally had some benefits from it. And I think there has a place in what you were saying, Mikey, about understanding my story. Like, it's allowed me to reframe all of the experiences I was speaking about earlier and see them with compassion and feel them with compassion. So, for example, my dad, who I love to bits, but quite viscerally hated as a younger person for that experience, I can sit with those polarizing parts and say he was doing the best he could.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be in a classroom full of screaming kids and having to put a smile on and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So it's no wonder by the time he came home he couldn't keep that mask up because he's working a really stressful job. Now, I couldn't understand that as a kid, so it's okay for me to honour those two different bits. And I think there's room for therapy to allow us to explore our past, to understand our stories, to frame them in a way which is more compassionate and compassionate to those around us. I'm not saying we should do that all the time. Some of the relationships we have as kids are really troublesome for some people, and therefore the outcome might be different for them with therapy, and we need to make that point. But I think there's that kind of, with coaching, like you said, I had the same experience. Okay, I feel a little bit healed, so I'm ready to start exploring new stuff as this new person. But for me it was like being attached to a bungee, where I would go off in this new direction, and then suddenly the bungee would get more stressed and it would get harder and harder and harder and harder, and then I'd ping back to my old behaviours because I wasn't equipped and I hadn't learnt the new skills how to be authentic.
Did you feel like you'd gone backwards slightly then? Because when you feel yourself going back to old traits, you beat yourself up a little bit for it.
Yeah, and that's why, sort of, having discovered, say, self-expression in my mid to late 20s through going to therapy and songwriting, that led me to Knots, to join a band, to leave my hometown and come here and meet the fine fellows that I formed Ardency with. We recorded, but for me, the lyrically was the most personal album I could make. And I called it Dear Human, and the emotion behind that was, oh my God, I've learnt to self-express and I've learnt how to be myself, and it's amazing. But back then, as like a late 20s, I'm like, and I want everyone else to experience this. And if you don't want to experience it, I want to know why you don't want to experience it, and I'm going to really floodlight you with it until actually you think I'm a bit of a knob.
You get it.
Looking back now, do you know what I mean? Because it's like you become a bit like, you have that initial epiphany, and then sometimes you become a bit evangelical.
This is the most magical experience.
Absolutely.
And everybody needs to feel the same way.
100%.
I had it with psychedelics, actually.
There you go.
This godlike experience, and then it was sort of the farm was a retreat then, and it was always me and somebody, and that turned into a bit psychosis-y in the end. It wasn't
I
a comfortable experience. A good story there,
Yeah.
but today's your stories. So
I want to hear that though. I'm remembering that.
will happily come out. It's been on this podcast somewhere, and I've been on
Amazing.
others and told them stories. But with you, Nick, then, so what is your path forward with this then? Do you know what you're wanting to go on and do and how and coach?
Ultimately, I'm doing it as organically and as authentically as possible. So I'm learning as I'm doing this as well. You know, right here, right now, I'm interested in working with as many men as I possibly can that feel ready for change and sustainable change.
I do like
whatever
what you
that
said
might be
before,
for them.
because that what works kind of idea as well.
Absolutely.
And I think people need to not just try a thing and go, oh, that didn't work. Right, therapy, nothing works. I'll just go back to my numb state and go into life like this. It's finding your feet with everything.
I think so.
And finding the truth in all the practices. Do you know what I mean? Therapy, there is a place for it,
Yeah.
but there
100%.
needs to be pick-up parts. So I really love what you said then. I just
Yeah.
wanted to interact and say that was
No,
really good.
I appreciate that, Mikey. And it will be different for every person, and that's the beauty of it for me. So as an individual that's within this space, wanting to support men to have their own journeys with this, the more skills I can develop that are rounded, and the more avenues I can, depending on what they reveal to me, say, oh, maybe go and explore this, see how that feels. I could do this technique with you. Do you fancy giving that a go? It's all on them to decide whether they want to do the work or not. But I think that thing I was telling you about, that bungee, for me, it's trying to be honest with them up front and say, you're not going to be here and working with me, go like this, and get to be the person you want to be without falling down, failing, wanting to give up, finding it really difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
As well as it having amazing moments and discoveries and learning new things about yourself that make you feel empowered and feeling like you're starting to change. It's a really non-linear but incredible journey if you're ready for it. At the same time, there are guys that I work with, that's working with me for a period of time. If you want to work with me one-off, because maybe, you know what, I know that I can get that promotion at work, but I'm just so anxious and I'm terrible in interviews. I can work on that one specific thing and we can do that quite quickly, and we don't need to delve into the rest of that other stuff. And that's the beauty of some of the skill sets that we've trained in.
Nice, man. And then they can find people for them other elements in their life
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, when they're ready.
But maybe they meet you, they talk to you, and they find your approach and they're like, oh, this is going to really help in this part of my life. I can feel that.
And for me, again, I'm always bringing it back to emotions. There's like an energetic feel for me.
Yeah.
Like, first time we met and we sat together in that circle, I can feel there's like an unspoken energy exchange.
I felt the same way. Yeah.
But when you lean into that and you start to trust it, that tells me something. Oh, I want to get to know this person a bit more. You know, there's something that I'm going to learn from him, and maybe there's something he can learn from me, and we're both going to grow as a result. For me, looking longer term, going back to your original question, building connection and community with men that are at different stages of their journeys, learning from some, imparting knowledge onto others, and continually growing and evolving is going to make a better world for each other. And just as important, and probably more important, the women and the kids in our lives. And that's like the big vision for me as a man.
This feels exciting to be a part of the process of. Do you know what I mean? And there's so many influencers out there, there's voices of all different natures, and I just think they all have place. Do you know what I mean? We were talking in a circle the other day, but about David Goggins. Have you heard his stuff?
No.
Oh, he's this Mr. Motivator style. Get up, stay hard, do it. And there were people saying, oh, I just don't think there's a place for that. There's no point in that. It just pushes people too far. But I'm like, actually, for me, sometimes I really need that kick. And as particularly I do boxing and football or something physical. And I know I can't listen to Alan Watts at that time, or I can't listen to Eckhart Tolle or somebody just being gentle with me. I'm like, I need a slap. Just really need it to get in that ring or something.
Yeah.
So I go, I confront that, I'll hear it. But if it was that all the time, every day,
Exactly.
I'd literally just become so resilient and I wouldn't have a switch off. So,
But I think you've hit on something really key there, Mikey, for me, which is that, especially in an ever increasingly busy world, how much time do we perceive that we have, and in reality do we have, to make sure our palette of stuff that we're doing is rich enough for us?
yeah.
And if we're working full-time jobs and we're raising kids and we're trying to keep relationships and friendships and all that kind of stuff, that palette can become quite black and white quite soon. And we're not really bringing ourselves and choice to that.
Yes.
It's just one task to complete after another. And I think that's where things like burnout you were mentioning can come in. Our world gets smaller and more pressurized as a result. So I absolutely agree that having as wide a possible palette as possible, and when we start to notice our emotions, and our emotions become our friends, and we think, oh, I'm feeling something in my body I've not felt in a while, and it's not comfortable. That for me is like, right, time out, Nick.
Yeah.
Carve out at least half an hour to go and sit with that.
Yes.
And think, when was the last time I felt this? What did it feel like? What was happening in my life? Oh, you know what? I wasn't doing my meditations.
Yeah.
Have I been doing my meditations? Oh, you know what? I haven't done it for a week. How did that go by? Well, it went by because I was really busy and I was doing this and I was doing that and there was this party and this social thing.
It truly is knowing self, isn't it?
100%.
Completely to its core. Who am I? And then when you feel this feeling emerge or creep in, oh, this is a part of the process that I need to take and embark on.
And for me, it never ends.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
That is the beauty of it too.
Yeah.
That's the exciting thing in life.
Exactly.
100%.
We talk a lot in, I suppose, self-development in the spiritual community in the world in terms of knowing oneself. Really get to know yourself. Do you feel you truly know yourself at the moment, Jess? Like,
I do at times. I'll be honest with you. I'm like, I always say to people, I'm on my own journey, I'm on my own path, it never ends. There will be people that are looking for perfection from a coach, and if that's what they want, I'm probably not for them. I have, through the work of Richard or Dick Swartz, who wrote an incredible book, No Bad Parts, and he created internal family systems, I am on my journey of understanding my parts. So, like I was saying earlier, through my survival mechanisms in childhood, I developed very strong, tough girl.
yeah,
Ice queen, perfectionist, good girl at times. So my way of knowing self, and Richard calls it self with a capital S, which I love, it's about building those relationships, developing that compassion with all of those parts. It's not about getting rid of them, it's about asking them to step away at times, because I don't want them to be governing everything. Granted, like today, for example, I'm really pleased I have Tough Girl. She's there, just in case I need her in this podcast.
Do you have a name
if I
for
feel
her?
safe.
Is it
You
just
know
Tough
what?
Girl?
I have a name for my inner critic. She's called Gretchen from Mean Girls.
Nice.
But no, my parts don't necessarily have names. The other parts, but I feel them a lot. Like she comes up a lot in my neck, in my shoulders. So I'm actually working with IFS therapists, because that's what I identified I wanted to understand more, to start understanding my parts a lot better. So it's going to enable me to meet myself with a capital S a lot more. So before I ever go on a coaching call, or before I'm having a boundary chat in my personal life, for example, I have to sit in silence, I have to meditate, and I have to speak to my parts. I have to ask them to step away. And Richard says that when we know we're in self, we're all the C's. I can't remember all of them, but like compassion, caring, confident. When I'm feeling that, and I feel the energy in me is different. I feel very compassionate to people. I feel love. It's coming from my heart center. That's when I'm self.
Yes.
And if I feel my parts coming up, especially when I'm holding space for someone, I need to check and just try and ask them to step back. So the answer to that is a sometimes.
Forever moving shades of grey.
Yeah, and you know what?
Which
I'm
it should be.
still exploring things like joy, because for me, because of my childhood trauma, I forebode joy. I missed a lot of my childhood because I had to be an adult very early. And part of my journey to find self with a capital S is playing around with joy. Like, what did I love doing in childhood? Like, what made me feel happiness and joy, and where can I be free? So, like, you know, I'm exploring things that would have made me go, oh God, no, I can't do that. Like dancing in front of people,
Sure.
like, you know, all little things like that are just tapping into like me. And I know that me in 5 years' time, me in 10 years' time is going to look different, and I love that. Like, we're not going to be a finished article. No, we're not going to get a certificate and be like, you're done now, woohoo. Like,
But you have this great check-in system where you know how to
Yeah.
find self always in that moment.
I can come back to my centre. Like, you're not going to, you are going to see actually, but like, coming back to that aligned me.
Yes.
And you know what? Sometimes I fail, I fuck up.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to
Human.
love that me, that human, messy Jess who was a perfectionist and is recovering from that.
Yeah, I say it to lightness and heaviness. If I'm feeling heavy in my days and in my actions, I know I'm not acting in my true self.
Yeah.
I can just feel it there. I'm acting clunky.
Yes.
And when I'm light and things just feel in that state of flow, I know that is what I'm supposed to be doing in that moment.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we can really develop that emotional resilience, that allowing it to be.
Who wrote that book?
Richard Schwartz.
Is it fairly new, or
He would have developed internal family systems. When did he say it was? Was it
Probably.
the 80s?
wow?
I don't know if it's quite that old, but it's the end of 20th century, start
Yeah.
of 21st. I think it's been around
Yeah.
for a good 20 years.
Oh, Paul, my friend who I went on that course with, 3-day intense course, we did a fairly similar thing. May have like modernised it slightly. We've got characters that we built up. and
Amazing.
I went through all these characters and then had to write my timeline out and think about where they've felt the need to come out and why they sort of built up these characters. And then we worked out sort of what needs are getting met, because in sort of psychiatry you've got 4 main needs. It's sense of validation, control a situation, variability in a situation, and ego, so a sense of self. They're like the 4 main pillars of our needs that we get met. And first of all, the same. I've got a lazy character, I've got a really angry character, Bane, I've named him, obviously. And I even had a highly sexual character.
Yeah.
But then I looked at all of them, named them, and I had a lot of hatred, a lot of guilt and anger towards these characters at first.
Yeah.
But then when I realised what needs they were trying to get met for me, because I couldn't do for myself in that moment, I actually fell in love with them and I accepted them. I was like, oh, thank you guys.
Yeah.
You had my back. It's just at the minute I can't have you around
Yes.
here,
That's
because
it.
I need this to be functioning.
Yeah.
I've got a forgetful one, because I love being in the moment. I love just being variable, free. I don't want to think about things. But I'm sorry for forgetful, Mikey. This is an important thing. We need SD cards or we're not going to get the shoot done.
No, but you're absolutely
So I
right.
have genuine conversations with them.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
it. That's exactly
Yeah.
what you've been talking about.
Yeah.
My inner critic I call Fergie.
No, I love this
Like,
conversation,
it's-
guys. I've a really good podcast.
And it's like, I used to listen to him all the time, and my self-worth was so low because I thought, well, I'm thinking this and I'm feeling it, so it must be real.
Is that Paul had a really angry character. He wouldn't mind me saying this either. And I think he called it Bane as well, or he had a similar anger name. But he had a conversation with Paul one night because Paul had a bad night and he was smashing things around the house, plates and punching things. And he started having this conversation, and he goes, "Yeah, Paul, you can hate me, mate, but the one waiting in the wings, he was going to kill you.
Yeah.
I'm the reason you're alive.
Yeah.
I'm the anger giving you that
Yeah.
assertive, let's go get him attitude.
Yes.
If you didn't have me, the other guy in the wings was going to take your life." And that on it, every time I
It's
tell
mo-
that story, the way he made me
Mikey's
feel,
Yeah.
I started crying when he told that,
Yeah.
because it made me say thank you to all them characters again and think, what could I have been given them? The one that, because I was close to ending it one night.
Yeah.
And there was just some character there, I don't know what it was, but I think it was that fuck you character.
Yeah.
It's like, no, do you know what? You all pissed me off and I'm going to go and show you something.
Yeah.
It's maybe not the healthiest of things, but bloody hell, it sent me on a path.
Any part of our subconscious even if it doesn't seem like it, ultimately wants to do one thing, and that's to keep us safe.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
All of those different parts you've just described. That's their purpose. That's why they're there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy, unless we know otherwise, and we can become more mindful and attuned to those parts, to just listen to them while they're in their part, which doesn't actually help us and makes us behave in ways that can have consequences that we will regret. When we thank them, when we bring compassion to them, when we recognise why they're there, we can honour them for what they did for us, whether it was 5 years ago or 25 years ago, because we needed them.
Yeah.
It's being able to talk to them in that moment when they come up and to say, do I need them right now or not? Because you might still need them in the here and now sometimes.
Yeah.
But more often than not, probably
it's
not.
like pick and mixing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's looking through all the bits and going, do you know what? I really need you right now.
Yes.
I need this access to that.
100%.
But having the conscious ability and awareness to
Yes.
when genuinely, and it's that honest conversation comes through, isn't
100%.
it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can a part of this discussion we're having, something that rose up a little was you've experienced addiction. I mean, you had wine in your life, but you've had it through your generations.
Yeah.
And you didn't really mention it in your generations, but you've experienced addiction yourself.
Yeah.
Could we talk a bit about addiction?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okie dokie.
Yeah.
So, Jess, addiction,
Yeah.
is it a disease?
Ooh. I can only speak from my personal experience, and I'm doing a lot of reflection personally on addiction, and actually it segues lovely from that part's conversation, because I actually personally now thank that part that was numbing out, because like you say, she saved me. I might not be here if it wasn't for that part. I'm exploring in myself how much my addiction is linked to my sensitivity. And my addiction has helped me kind of numb the pain internally until I was ready to face it. I'm still absolutely exploring my relationship with things like alcohol, because I still have alcohol in my life. I'm not sure that will be the case forever. But yeah, I think addiction is such a personal thing, and you know, I have to look at it as well from my experience with my dad. Addiction for me is so weighted, and it's such a big one for me, and actually as I'm talking about it, my gut's like because I hated my dad for his addiction, and yet I did the same thing to a certain extent. So it's that duality that I'm having to face with, like, I hate you and I love you, and I'm so thankful for you. So it's one that I don't think I have the answer to. I don't think it's a disease. I think it's an absolute coping mechanism. I think it's a survival mechanism. I think it's a behaviour and a symptom of the actual fucking problem.
Yeah, I like that saying. Drugs and alcohol are not the problem, they're the solution to the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of depth within that.
And I think I would add to that, very similar to Jess, I can only talk from my personal experience and learning that's meaningful to me. I think addiction shows up everywhere, for everyone, personally. I think people that go on a shopping binge or an eating binge or are angry all the time, I think we can get addicted to our emotions. For me, though, it's almost like a trauma response. And if we understand trauma as experiences that we have that come with them difficult emotions, and then we ask ourselves a really important question, what did we make that mean? Whenever we're potentially going to experience that again, we will choose to not want to experience that subconsciously, because we'll want to protect ourselves. So drugs and alcohol are what society might deem as potentially dangerous and bad maybe, but there are others that go unnoticed. What about work addiction? That's applauded. Or being really no one says, or very few people exercise, for example. Going to the gym every day, being as fit as you can possibly be, could be thought of as an addiction.
And
So-
you get applauded for that, don't you?
I think so. So it's about there's a bigger question there to ask for me, and I want to cite somebody here because somebody that we've gotten to know over the last couple of years, Josh Connolly, talks a lot about this. So I want to give him a mention, and I would definitely shout out anyone to explore some of the things that he has to say, and especially his breath work, because he does a lot of breath work for emotional release.
He's a highly sensitive guy,
And he's a highly sensitive man. But yeah, it's a fascinating question for me personally, and I think it is sometimes actually. I don't want to. I want to choose not to experience my emotions because I'm highly sensitive, and they're too much.
Yeah.
Maybe I've been experiencing them all day. Maybe I've had 3 or 4 clients, and actually I just need to sit with those emotions, and I do that, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna deal with this all right now. I'm gonna immerse myself in an album.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm going to have a beer, or maybe I'm going to go for a run, or whatever it is I'm going to do. I need to just switch off
Escapism.
to be able to go back in. I think
Yeah.
there's room for it.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
And I like, again, it is my favourite word, but the nuance
Yeah.
and in how you discuss things, because I feel I've got so many friends that in the spiritual community, I've got friends in AA, I've got friends for parts of different causes. The only time where I struggle with it is when it's too absolute.
Yes.
It's the black and the white.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably about 3 things in the world that I've got an absolute look to.
Yeah.
And I could probably still have a conversation about that
Yeah.
and work out more into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of like atrocious things down there, sexual abuse,
Yeah,
pedophilia, they're awful things where I go, I can't have a discussion here. But when it comes to how humans behave, the psychology, the emotions, the thinking, discussions need to be had. There is one case I saw for addiction. I think it was a Russell Brand documentary. I like Russell Brand.
I love Russell Brand.
Really cool guy. And he worked with a Professor David Nutt, who's one of the UK's leading sort of scientists within addiction. So he works on the brain chemistry. And they work with rats or mice on this particular study. And have you heard of it? There's Rat Utopia, and I can't remember the other rat study. So I'll try and not go too deep into it because this will be a lot of airtime. But really quickly, the first study, they got these rats in a cage, and there was a shutter. So the rats would go and press this button, and then they go and get, I think it was cocaine they were rewarded with. But there was something like 92% of these rats would go and press the button, wait, get the cocaine, and chill. And then when they'd had enough, they'd stop pressing the button.
Yeah.
But there was an 8% that would go press the button and just scratch and go crazy for it, and then keep going and going and going and going, and then just do it till death.
Yeah.
And they were looking at this chemistry, so they attached these, I don't know, electrical impulses to them. And those people that were in addiction centres, the way that dopamine and serotonin was being released was incredibly similar to this small 8%.
Yeah.
So they were like, okay, that's really interesting. But also, then they're in a terrible environment. They're just in this cage with a shutter. So what they did, they put them in a huge factory, and they could have as much sex and play and food and things like that as they wanted. And again, it was a much smaller percentage because the environment was different. So there's a lot that didn't turn to it was laced with cocaine this time. They had water, one just water, one laced with cocaine. But there was still some that kept going to the cocaine one. Really small percentages, but they would, and it was the way that the serotonin and dopamine was being released. And when they did the MRIs on addicts, they were very similar. So it makes me think maybe there is a certain percentage of people that just can't and will go into chaos if substances are brought into their life. But like you say, then the pleasure, it could be masturbation, it could be sex, it could be eating. It's always there, isn't it? So
I really like what you said there, Mike, and I think for me personally, as you were saying that, I thought actually, I can feel a different experience between my experience with drugs and alcohol and tobacco. I smoked for 30 years, and I was very much like one of those rats that just kept going back with tobacco. Whereas, and I was for a while with alcohol and drugs. when I think about how I've retreated from those, so I gave up smoking after 30 years without any NRT or anything like that, because I was finally ready to, but it was fucking hard, like really hard. Giving up weed, having smoked weed for 20 years, was a different experience.
Yeah.
So cigarettes, it was like they're there one day and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And then that was how I dealt with it, and I had an experience that way. With weed, it was more like a slow withdrawal in quantities, frequency, and that kind of stuff. I couldn't do that with cigarettes. I tried. So I really like what you said then, so I'm going to reflect on that.
I think that's for people to really have honest conversations of how much damage is this causing. My finances, my friendships, my health.
Yeah.
You've got to go through this big list, but genuinely have a conversation with yourself.
100%.
Don't just go, fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got to sit with each one for a good half an hour maybe
100%.
and work it through. Because when that documentary with Russell Brand was on, and they started going through these studies and looking at them, I remember I was at a house party, and it probably was cocaine or something, but all my friends, they were just chilling and just being normal and excitable chat. You've seen it before.
Yeah.
But I was the one that was like, have we got any more? Is there any more? And everyone was like, Mikey, calm down, just relax. I was like, I can't. Something just happened to me. So I do have a lot of compassion there for when people are going into burnout, into absolute chaos. And I'm like, I feel your brain just really resonates with this thing. And it's just such a shame that it causes such dramatic effect to you.
I think
know
so.
What I mean?
I think you're absolutely right with the consciousness. And I said something on another podcast. It's not out yet, but I'm like, I'll probably lose half my followers because I said it, and I was like, but I really believe this is, again, my experience, that coming back to what damage is that doing, we can often see the damage of alcohol. We can see the damage of drugs. I mentioned Love Island, which is why I think I'm going to lose a lot of followers. But I said, for me, that program is so damaging, personally.
Yeah.
Because I feel really like the aftercare is really dangerous, having what's happened to a lot of the participants. But certain shows for me feed my shame. Feed, especially I think for women as well, it's really big in terms of body image. And like I said, that for me is just as dangerous as alcohol.
Yeah.
And that could get soundbited, and it's like, what are you fucking talking about? The reason I say this is because we don't see that damage until we are addicted, until we are fighting, until our relationships fall apart, until we're self-harming. It's so dangerous what we're filling our minds with sometimes. Subconscious messages about our worthiness and our beliefs and about not being good enough. So for me, I would say I have to be really mindful of what I'm absorbing on social media, on TV, what am I binging on Netflix, because that is feeding that subconscious belief system about me, which will then ultimately seek numbing out. Alcohol, drugs. I'm going to pick a fight with Nick because it will. My anger will come out. And that's why I wanted to add a bit of context to that, because I'm so passionate about it, that actually it's about being conscious of all these things that are seen as like fine. And it's like, for me, it's like being curious,
I like
questioning.
what you said, like, it's so easy to pick out the obvious, isn't it? And then you go, but how are you operating in your life? How are all them relationships? And if you go into honesty, you go, it's really jarring or a painful experience, then what are the external sources that you're taking in?
Just being mindful of everything, isn't it? What are we absorbing? What is nourishing our soul? What's depleting us? I talk about it all the time, like, where are our energy leaks? Because all of it is.
Could your life be improved?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, let's have a look at what the current ongoings are.
Exactly.
And when we think about if we become curious about what you just said then, Mikey, how can our life be improved? What does that actually mean? Because when we really get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's not the stuff out there that defines how much I like. It's what we're experiencing. So how often are we experiencing peace, love, joy, and how often are we experiencing anger, resentment, self-hatred, all that kind of stuff? And a lot of the work that we do, there's a really useful tool which is like an emotional pinwheel, which starts in the centre with things like sad, happy, angry, and then it goes out a bit further, and it will give you more kind of, to use nuanced words, which split anger into like resentment, fury, all that kind of stuff. And you get right to the outside, and if you follow that path out, if I ask a client how you feeling today, they say, I'm just pissed off, I feel great. Okay, let's see where that sits in the middle. Well, it just sits with, I'm angry. Okay, let's work it down. And then actually it's resentment. Well, why am I resented? Because I've just seen someone get a promotion at work. And you can use that emotional tool.
That's why language is so important, isn't
100%.
it? And I feel people that don't have the access to the words they want to use and articulate themselves, that's where the sort of frustration comes from.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That'd be a good wheel to just have at home, wouldn't it? To really like put on the bedroom wall, look through, go, okay, work your own sort of story out.
Increase your emotional vocabulary. Do you know what I mean? Like, be able to differentiate between those different forms of anger, rather than just think, I'm angry all the time. It's like, no, actually, I'm not. I'm frustrated at X, Y, and Z. I'm resentful about X, Y, and Z. And they're all little things you can then begin to work on with that person. And before they know it, when you then ask them, how are you feeling? I'm not feeling angry. I'm now just feeling frustrated. My resentment's gone. We've worked through that.
So I love you're both your own entities and you're coaching people, doing very similar things. You're ready to merge this together. Have you got a business name prepping up? I won't get you to say it yet, but
not yet.
Okay.
It's funny, I've got so many ideas. Like, I'm a manifestor in my human design, and my brain is just constantly like I like my drive system's ready to go. But we are looking to merge at some point. I'd love to, do some work within education, do some work within corporate. I'm very passionate about, I want to do a TED talk on, how HSPs make incredible leaders. I'd love to do more leadership development, hone into these superpowers as leaders. And I think we could branch off in a multitude of different areas. But we come from very similar values. We're grounded in very similar things. And I think, we're very fortunate, to be doing what we're doing together. I don't think there's many people out there doing something similar. And I think, I do think that it will naturally evolve, and the title, the name will come to us at the right time.
We've started to experiment with it, so we've kind of softly put an idea out there about creating like a membership, a community for sole traders and business owners. Like, we've fast learned over the last year or two that, and you'll know this yourself, like, it's not just a thing you're passionate about that you get to do. You have to also be an accountant, and you have to get into sales, and you have to understand all these other parts to make the whole thing work while you're doing it on your own and growing it. That can be quite a lonely experience. So given that we're highly sensitive and emotions are our thing, we thought, well, there are business coaches out there that can tell you the steps to create a business, and there's marketing coaches that can help you with marketing, and there are accountants out there. But are there people providing a space to be able to grow their emotional experience and to share that, and to be able to then be coached in a group setting? But also the other key thing as part of that we're envisioning is what we call reflective practice, and that's what we've touched on as part of this discussion of when something's feeling a bit out of alignment. It's easy to just ignore it and just plow on, especially when we're trying to grow a business, but for people that maybe haven't quite discovered that yet, it's an opportunity for them. So even though we're doing it out of a single business, it's something we're going to be doing as joint coaches and as a joint venture. So it's really that, come back to us in a year or two's time and see where we've got to with it. Do you know what I mean?
I'm really excited to do that. That podcast is going to be a groundbreaker. But say somebody's come to you and then you've sort of worked out maybe they're not highly sensitive. Do you still work with them?
If I feel like my skill set aligns and they feel safe and our energies are aligned, I'm very passionate about checking that energy again with my intuition, then absolutely, I would absolutely coach someone that didn't feel like they were highly sensitive, as long as, I felt like I was the right person for them.
Yeah, we've discussed this as well, not just in terms of sensitivity, but in terms of gender, for example.
Yeah.
And even though predominantly I will work with men and you'll work with women, there may be a better fit for either of us to work with the opposite sex.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so we're open to that.
And
It's all about
non-binary as well. So
absolutely.
It's a conversation you have with them.
Yeah.
Sort of what energy do you feel you want to express in these sessions? And
I think so. And because we there's the way that we show our business to the world is to invite people to be curious about themselves, and in a way which we kind of hope is inviting, and that it's either going to speak to you or it isn't. And if it speaks to you and they continue to take interest, they generally start to have a conversation. When you start to have a conversation with people, you start to get to know them, and then it's a two-way thing, isn't it? And if you're both being authentic as part of that, or as authentic as you can be in that given moment, that's generally how clients seem to come to us. Rather than, here's an offer for this, you know,
discount.
No, do you know what I mean? That works in some businesses 100%. For us, because the core of the kind of coaching we're doing is emotional work. To allow you to progress in life as is meaningful to you, then that just seems more aligned.
Have you tried a group session yet? Have you put anything together?
I host groups, so I've got a group program, a 12-week group program called Sensitive Soul Society. That at the moment is for women.
You're good with your names.
Thanks. Anyone who identifies as a woman, and that walks them through loads of areas that they probably weren't anticipating. I think people come to me and they're like, can you fix me? Like, can you get rid of this trait? And I'm like, come on in. No. But it walks them through their trait and how that's showing them up for them, building that self-awareness. It then helps them to do a bit of shadow work, so understanding our unconscious mind and body. So talking a lot of energy, as well as what are my belief systems, what are my values, where have they come from, what can I let go of, and then it will walk them through what soul care, so self-care, looks like for them. So a lot of that is nervous system regulation, but you know, self-care looks different on everyone. You know, I know there was a lot of talk of miracle mornings and get up at 5 a.m, but it's like, does that work for you? So finding a routine that's going to actually work for them in their life. And then it's all about building confidence, emotional freedom. So how can we build safe spaces where we can start to show up in our emotions, show up without our masks, feel safer to be our authentic selves, and really building that resilience. So a lot of highly sensitive people that go through Sensitive Soul Society kind of really start to hear that inner voice and that intuition that is our gift as highly sensitive people. Like, I want to now pass this on. They often come out going, this is fucking incredible. I need to tell the world. So
you just told me the secret.
So they then go on to be coaches themselves. So I've got people that have come through my one-to-one and my group program that are now training in NLP, and they're going to be coaches for highly sensitive people.
The ripple effect.
It's beautiful, and it's why I've got a vision of like creating an academy to mentor coaches, highly sensitive coaches, to then go on into their businesses. So
I love that you've got the element of the one-to-one and the group sessions, because I can see the benefit of one-to-one. They can really hone in on who they are, and you can build that with them. But then for them to go and implement that with other people could be quite alien to them.
Absolutely.
But then when you've already done it in a group session, you've got other people there that feel similar ways, and they realise they're not the only one. It adds a completely new element to them too.
Absolutely. I think a lot of highly sensitive people really struggle with connection. I did a podcast actually that's out tomorrow about it. Just drop that in.
Go on.
But
it'll be out now. Where can I find it? You can
thanks. It's the Empowering Path podcast.
Awesome.
So I talked about friendships for highly sensitive people, because I think we can start feeling really alone, and especially when we start doing the work and people naturally fall away. You know, maybe the energy vampires that got something from us start to drift away because they can't get that anymore. We crave deep connection, and often like the connections that we have are very surface, shallow level. So, you know, one of the reasons as well that I wanted to create these groups is for people to meet like-minded, highly sensitive people that are maybe having those similar experiences of, oh my God, I'm so lonely, I'm so alone, no one sees me, no one hears me.
I'm very highly sensitive, guys. I've just figured it out.
Yes,
mate, welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club.
Mikey.
But yeah, it's really hard, and I think a lot of people really, when they actually listen to themselves, find sharing quite scary. Like the mother wound for women is really big. You know, sisterhood wound is huge. Where we talk about women supporting women, but actually, do I feel safe around you? So that links in with the whole nervous system of like, do I feel safe around these people? So it's about doing that beautiful inner work with each other whilst building that safety, whilst building that trust. And some connections will go off after it, some won't, and that's life, isn't it? But it's offering that space to be able to do that.
I think that's you touched on one of the most hardest parts of wanting to do any of this kind of work and self-improvement and to develop a growth mindset, is that you will change, and therefore the relationships you have with the people around you will change, and some of them will change for the better, but actually you may lose people along the way, as well as gaining brand new people we've met because we've both gone into an environment that maybe we weren't getting something that we needed elsewhere. So things like circles, group programs, we've done group programs ourselves as a couple and individually, because you're going to meet those like-minded people that maybe can make that transition that little bit more easier. When I first started doing this work, I realised that I felt quite isolated and alone, and that's why I stopped doing it. And that bungee I was talking about pings me back to the safety of, well, all right, my life wasn't perfect, but at least I felt safe within it, and I knew my role. And even though I was numbing out every night, it's like suddenly that felt like the best thing on earth again.
I get completely
Do you know
what
what
you're
I mean?
saying there.
So it's I think that's such a key thing.
There's so many avenues with this podcast to go down.
I don't know how you're going to cut the time.
The thing I definitely want to speak on is the superpower element. So I've just worked out through this podcast, and maybe some of the people listening too, we're highly sensitive, and to some people, that could, as we spoke of before, could feel of a weakness. But you're saying no, it's a superpower.
Absolutely.
This is awesome. How so?
So when we can really look after ourselves as highly sensitive people, we can look after our nervous systems, we can start showing up more confident and more resilient. Ultimately, we have the most incredible intuition. Yes, maybe for a lot of us, me included, trauma, life, stress, everything meant I didn't hear that voice. But when we can peel back those layers, we have the most strong, incredible inner voice and intuition. It comes back to that innate trait about sensing danger as animals, you know. But that's why I think leaders, highly sensitive leaders, like, I mean, you look at who's leading at the world at the moment. I'm really sorry, but it needs to change.
Donuts.
Like, imagine if we had highly sensitive people there that were able to tune in with their emotions, that were emotionally resilient, that were able to listen to those voices, that had the most incredible compassion and empathy for other humans, and actually considered that first and foremost of how this is going to impact on everyone around you. But you can see things coming a mile off, So as a leader or as a highly sensitive person, that's incredible. You can put action in place. Whatever that looks like, you can implement that. So as a leader, you can hire the right people. You can put the right systems in place to make sure that you can be more resilient. But it serves you as a person, as a highly sensitive person, to be able to be like, I'm going to listen to my gut. What's it telling me? These are the actions that I'm going to take. And just knowing that, like, our emotions, our sensitivity, our empathy are absolutely beautiful. Like, we can unpack all these conditioning that we've been given as humans about sensitivity being a weakness. We can dismantle all this bullshit beliefs about sensitivity. We can start to model what it looks like to be sensitive to young people. Because there'll be highly sensitive children out there that are equally thinking there's something wrong with them. So we can be showing up in the world, showing them that sensitivity is amazing, our emotions are amazing, crying is amazing, shouting, screaming in the right environment is amazing. But it ultimately has everything to thrive in this world, as long as, like I say, we're looking after ourselves and we've learnt to put boundaries in place, and we've learnt to not soak up the energy of other people. And we've done the work, like we've done that inner work to kind of peel off all those layers.
I love everything you said then. You made me have this thought too. It must be somewhat easier to coach highly sensitive people in the term of when you mentioned the leaders and people that seem to not have any emotion, they're just cold and this bitterness and anger and very tactical thinking, to get them to start feeling and to work with that. Because when you can, you know, you work with a kid and they just seem straight away angry at something. I hate school, I hate this, I can work with that because that's an emotion. I can build on you. We can change that, or we can play with that, and you're thinking something, you're feeling something, you're showcasing something. And that excites me. But then for people to come in and they don't know, I'm not bothered. I don't. It just feels this numbness. That's hard to bring out its shell, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think to thrive in any area, it doesn't have to be in the workplace, but I think to thrive, like to be a person that people feel safe to come and be themselves. The best leaders I've ever had have made me feel safe to show up exactly what I need to do in that moment. And the reason, actually one of the catalysts for me that I didn't mention earlier, was being told by a female leader in the corporate world, you are too sensitive. I was having panic attacks at the time. I was crying every day at work. She told me, you're way too sensitive. You cry the whole time. You shouldn't show your team, because I was a manager. You shouldn't show your team. You're crying. You're not a good enough manager if you're sensitive. You need to be more like him. And I saw these people, and like my intuition was going, what the fuck is this world?
Who's
like,
that?
Is this what we're supposed to be modelling? Like, and it literally, now I look back and it's like, it was either like you say, the stone cold leaders that showed you nothing, or the ones that would try and do that and then flip out and bang tables, or like slam phones and scream at you. And it's like, my nervous system in the workplace was shot. I was like sat there like, well, I'm never going to go to you, and I'm never going to open up to you.
This is literally why I had to work for myself. I had to be self-employed, because in every environment I've never felt safe, and I've never felt worthy, and I just have this fear of being told what to do, and being in someone else's time, and not feeling good enough for them anyway. I think that does transcend from my mum. She's a very powerful lady, and has always sort of demanded things to be a certain way. So then when I've been confronted by that in the workplace, I've just put this big red to bull up, and I'm not doing that. There's been punch-ups in workplaces, to be honest.
I hear you.
It wasn't good.
But I hear you with that.
To just be shown respect, to just be shown love, appreciation, kindness, and then stern tellings when you've done something justified that needs a telling for. I can put up with that, because all the other stuff you've shown me and showcased to me already, we've got this rapport, we've got this understanding. But to just turn up and be, fucking do that, fucking do that, and you're like, I'm not sold.
I'm out.
I'm out.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I say the term a lot, sensitive badass, because someone said to me once,
I
I was really triggered. She said to me, well, you're highly sensitive as a coach, aren't you? So I bet you don't really do any difficult conversations. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I've worked really hard on my boundary setting, actually. And like, it's dismantling that as well. Like, you can be highly sensitive and incredibly empathetic and have some incredibly difficult conversations and still make that person feel seen and heard and safe.
My really good friend, and she did this podcast, the best teacher I've ever met. Do you know when somebody, you just go, oh, thank God you're in that role. You found your thing. And she didn't get the promotion. At the time, she's just had it now. Yesterday, actually. Well done, Helen.
Yay!
But she got told she couldn't have that promotion because she was too sensitive. And when you said that then, I just felt this anger emerge. I was like, I can't believe people do that to people.
But I think it's that, it's a lot of, the word that comes to my mind when you two were talking then is control. And a lot of any organisation, whatever it is, and sometimes even a family unit, there's an element of control where there are strong ideas about how things should be, how behaviours should be, what emotions are acceptable, what emotions aren't acceptable. And it's only by being curious about it can we begin to think, is this really working for everyone? Now, if 1 in 5 of us are highly sensitive, what about the other 80%, the other 4%? That doesn't mean they have no emotions. It doesn't mean they can't feel any sensitivity. Far from it. We're emotional beings. All of us in one form or another. from my perspective as a male, when we go back to the horrific suicide statistics, in a man's world, why is it that when all the cards are stacked in our favour, there's 3-4 times as many men killing themselves as women? Why is that? And being curious about that most horrific of statistics, for me, we can then work back from that and say, well, actually, maybe the guy that's saying like, oh, this doesn't bother me, that we were going back earlier, how many times do you read awful stories and it's like, we never knew. They always seem so happy and had it together. Like
the mask.
So I think it's just being curious about this and encouraging, wherever you sit on the sensitivity spectrum, or how in tune you are as a person. Ultimately, I think I said this when I did the radio show with you, all of us, when we put our head on the pillow at night, are left with our own heads and our own emotions. If that for you, more often than not, is a decent place to be, wherever you are with sensitivity, however well the world's working for you or not, I think you're doing okay.
It's a nice way of looking at things.
If it isn't, and only each of us can answer that as individuals, at best, I think you're being a bit naive and you're fooling yourself that you can spend a whole life like that and be okay. And I think that's the way I choose to look at it, because I can feel compassion for earlier stages in my life when I was that person going to bed at night with that screaming inside of like, this isn't how I want to feel, this isn't who I want to be, then wake up the next day with a big smile on my face and be a right lad in a football dressing room to survive. I think there's just something there for me that if we really, really want to make jumps as individuals, opportunities there to do that in small groups. Opportunities are there with more and more people opening doors for other people to come together in different ways. I hope that continues. I hope that when people bad rep social media for that kind of triggering response, that polarised, you either agree with me or you're against me, that kind of thing.
Cancel culture.
Maybe that is just reflective of where the collective we's got to as a species right now. Our emotional intelligence collectively isn't quite there. However, there are pockets within social media everywhere of absolute beauty and connectedness and authenticity. And I hope, my hope is long after I'm gone, that individuals, communities and the Western world especially decides actually maybe there's a different way and a better way that benefits everybody rather than just a select few. And even those select few, are they really doing okay? I don't know. But that's the kind of stuff I like to think about.
I love hearing it.
It's important.
I like the feeling of there's always another way. Because I think that's where people, and we've discussed it on this podcast, fall short is I've been told to do this, I've tried this, it didn't work, and that's that. So to always believe, there's a lesson within that somewhere, and I'm going to go and take that lesson that I enjoyed and take it on this route and try something new out too. Oh,
and by the way, I can be a right fucker sometimes. You know what I mean? I can react to that trigger. It can be in some moments for me like I've not done any work sometimes. And that's when that's for me certainly what resilience means. It's experiencing that and going, oh shit, and not thinking, well, that's a load of bollocks.
Drowning in
As
shame.
I think it's really, it can be really easy to do in the early days of doing this work, but it's just like, you know what, I'm going to forgive myself and I'm going to hold myself for that behaviour and I'm going to do better next time if I possibly can.
I like what you said about social media and the way you turn your attention to. Do you find in your coaching you have to approach social media quite a lot and have conversations surrounding that?
Social media. It ebbs and flows with me in terms of like how it affects me energetically. I think generally when I'm in really good energy, like social media is incredible for connection. And I think, I started my business in lockdown. Like it's been incredible. The platforms are amazing. There are some platforms I prefer over others. But I have to be very mindful and very conscious. Again, coming back to what am I absorbing? I have to be mindful of like if my energy is really depleted, like I'm going to do my business and I'm going to come off well, I say I'm going to do that, and then I'm like unconsciously scrolling, but it's okay. But also, you know, who am I connected to sometimes? And I'd openly say to people, like, I have to mute people in my field a lot of the time, just because I'm like, I have to stay in my lane, and I'm highly sensitive. I pick up on stuff without even noticing it. So it's like, I just have to be really mindful of that energetically. But I think overall, when we can be conscious and selective about how we're using it and who we're connected to, it's absolutely incredible. It really, really is. How about you?
For me, it's about being in the driving seat and about choice. And I would actually widen it from social media actually to phone management.
Yes, good shout.
Yeah.
So I don't have a single notification on my phone at all, other than an hourly set of affirmations
That's cool.
that are meaningful to me, that I know that whatever happens in the preceding hour, when I open my phone, there's going to be one, sometimes two or even three affirmations there that will bring me back to that centre we've been speaking about.
Any that come to mind?
Yeah, just I am good enough
That's
is a massive one for me. I am enough.
The enough thing,
Yeah.
when that stumbled, and that was a recent discovery, the reason you've created these characters, you've acted in the way you've acted, is all from this feeling of never being enough.
Yeah.
And when I got told that, I was like, why? How did you know?
Yeah.
It was such a big discovery, the enough. I love that.
I think my favourite one is actually the only thing I know for certain is that I know nothing for certain.
Yeah.
And that for me is like,
That was a
that helps
discovery.
keep like Eddie ego
Yeah.
in a little bit of check. When I
Yeah,
start
yeah.
feeling like, oh, you know what, I'm starting to get this self-development stuff nailed, you know. I'm a fucking
Yeah.
great coach. It's like, oh, hang on, who's talking there?
Yeah, I like that.
Do you know what I mean?
Guys,
So
we've
it helps,
literally
man.
we've done 2 hours.
Wow.
Joking.
2 hours.
Wow.
We've
In this
smashed
heat as
it.
well. We smashed
yeah,
it.
Well done, us. Would you
Loved
come
it.
back on?
Absolutely.
Of course,
Yeah,
mate.
I
Big
think
pleasure.
we could turn this into a bit more of a regular basis, couldn't we?
I love that.
We could sort of pick a topic.
Yes.
Like because I was really talking about in there was so many avenues and possibilities and paths to trench down.
Yeah.
We kind of need to pick a topic
Yeah.
and just hammer home in that field.
Yeah.
Would you be up for coming on and being my sort of mental health gurus and guides?
Absolutely.
Yes,
would
mate.
I?
Be
Call
honest.
it fixing Mikey.
2-to-1 coaching, Mikey.
But no, I really appreciate your time today. This has been...
Thanks for having us,
It's
man.
weird, isn't it, when certain conversations just make you feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And this is one of those where, when we touch on mental health, it grabs me. I just feel, I don't know what it's doing, but there's this pull.
Yeah.
I've got the curiosity and
Yes.
this fascination around it of just tell me what you know. And that is, you're always learning.
Yeah.
The ego,
absolutely.
when the ego decides, I know it all now, that's when you need to have a real good conversation back to
100%,
self.
100%.
But yeah, I've had so many sort of mental health and spiritual conversations, and I love that in this one I've learnt so much. So thank you. Yeah, it's
Thank
really
you, man.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having us.
interesting, and I love you both as people.
Aw.
Can you tell everybody where they can find out everything you do and
Yeah.
where they can get in touch with you?
Should I go first? So you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at The Highly Sensitive Coach. My website's www.jessfrost.co.uk, and I've got my podcast, The Empowering Path Podcast. I'm also on LinkedIn as well, Jess Frost, if you want to find me.
Beauty. Nice work, Jess.
So I am at the Highly Sensitive Guy on Instagram predominantly. Other platforms are available, and nickedgarcoaching.co.uk is my website if you want more details. I'm always up for conversation, so just get in touch.
Oh, beautiful, guys. Again, thank you so much. I'll do my bit. Guys, you've been a part of the Old Farm Bus, Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. I'm going to leave you on this. I always do. I always will. Just be nice to one another, you beautiful set of buggers. See you later. Cheers, guys.